It was Saturday, November 24th, 1973, 2 days after Thanksgiving. 30-year-old Ethel Higonnet, a fellow at Radcliffe Institute and the wife of Harvard professor Patrice Higonnet, was walking in Longfellow Park, only a few blocks from her home, when she was suddenly set upon by an unknown assailant at around 5:45 p.m. According to a 14-year-old girl who witnessed the early stages of the incident, Ethel was approached from behind by a thin, dark-haired individual who was staggering like a drunk. The man proceeded to grab his victim and attempted to drag her away. Ethel reportedly struggled and fought the man, but was pushed deeper into the park and eventually into a thick clump of bushes. Neighbors alerted police after hearing a gunshot, but by the time officers arrived at the scene, it was too late. Ethel Higonnet was found naked from the waist down, dead of a single bullet wound through the head. It appeared as though her attacker had been attempting to rape her, but then shot her instead after fearing that her struggles and screams would attract too much attention. The murder, taking place in a relatively affluent neighborhood, stunned the college community, and it appeared that investigators had few clues to go on. Making the case even more baffling was the fact that only 3 days later, a secretary at Harvard named Barbara Brown sustained a serious head wound after an unidentified assailant threw a brick at her. Though it was speculated that the two crimes might have been related, witness descriptions of the perpetrators differed enough that police surmised they were likely dealing with unconnected occurrences. The murder of Ethel Higonnet remains a dark and nearly forgotten chapter in the storied history of Harvard University. On the day before Thanksgiving, in the town of South Strabane, Pennsylvania, 21-year-old Susan Rush left her job at the Murphy's department store, located at the Washington Mall, and headed out toward her car. It was a little past 6 p.m., and presumably Susan was looking forward to spending the holiday with her family. She would never get the chance. On the morning of Thanksgiving Day, November 25th, 1976, Susan's brother, Gary, had gotten an early start driving around the city looking for his missing sister. The family had become worried when she had failed to come home, and Gary was attempting to retrace her known movements. At around 9 a.m., he spotted her car parked along North Avenue, less than a mile from the mall where she worked. All the car doors were locked, but there was no sign of Susan. Gary contacted the authorities. When officers arrived, they quickly discovered the body of Susan Rush in the trunk of her own vehicle. She had been raped and strangled with a length of string or leather. She was clothed, though her sweater and pants were inside out. Though the investigation into Susan's murder hit a wall almost immediately, the chain of unsettlingly similar crimes that would plague Washington County, Pennsylvania, continued into the following year, claiming at least 3 more young women, and leading some detectives to theorize that a serial killer, dubbed the Washington Strangler, might be responsible. It was a little past 2 p.m. on the afternoon of November 23, 1977, the day before Thanksgiving, and 6-year-old Beth Lin Barr was on her way home from school near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. What she couldn't have known was that earlier that morning, a man had tried to pick up a woman waiting for a bus in Wilkinsburg, only a few blocks away from where Beth now walked. Little Beth Barr never made it home from school that day, and as her father was a police officer, a search for the girl was undertaken only hours after she failed to appear. Ominously, a witness reported that on that Wednesday afternoon, she had seen a man carrying a little girl and putting her into a dingy blue sedan with red and white license plates. The suspect was described as a white male in his 40s, of average height and build, with brown curly hair. He was clad in a gray suit and sported blue-tinted spectacles with square frames. This individual matched the description of the man who had tried to pick up the woman at the Wilkinsburg bus stop earlier that same day. The fate of 6-year-old Beth Barr would not be known until spring of 1979. On March 22nd, a man named Joseph Leonard was walking his dog in the woods in Monroeville when he came across a partially buried skeleton. The plaid coat and red pantsuit that still covered the bones immediately suggested to police that the remains were those of 6-year-old Beth Lin Barr, who had been abducted more than a year before. Though the body was too decomposed to determine if the child had been raped, a post-mortem examination established that the cause of death was multiple stab wounds in the little girl's chest. It appeared that she had been dead for quite a long while, suggesting that her death had occurred only a brief time after she was kidnapped. Because the area where Beth Barr was last seen alive was very close to the location where some of the belongings of a 1976 murder victim named Barbara Jean Lewis were found, some investigators posited a link between the two crimes, and some have gone a step further and attempted to link these two killings with several others occurring in the area, including that of the previously mentioned Susan Rush in late November of 1976 and Brenda Ritter in May of 1977, as well as the kidnapping and murder of 5-year-old Stephanie Baller in nearby Beaver Falls in 1977. Those who adhere to the theory that at least the Barr and Lewis murders were linked sometimes speculate that serial killer Edward W. Edwards might have been the culprit, as he was thought to have been in the area at the time, as was multiple murderer Edward Surratt. However, no substantial evidence exists to definitively pin the crime on either of the two convicted killers, and detectives are still at a loss as to which of the Pennsylvania and West Virginia slayings are related, if any, and who is responsible for perpetrating them. In 2021, investigators announced to the media that they had received an anonymous letter naming a suspect in the crime, and stated that they were optimistic that the murder of Beth Lin Barr would soon be solved. As of Thanksgiving 2024, however, there have been no new developments. 15-year-old Eric Doratio had been having problems both at home and at school. He was frequently truant and was thought to be involved with drugs. The last time his mother saw him was on Thanksgiving, November 24, 1977, but later on that same day, Eric was reportedly seen running away from a Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania teen shelter. 3 days after that, Eric was spotted leaving a house near McKeesport, and later that day was dropped off by a friend at the intersection of routes 22 and 48 in Whitehall. On the morning of November 29, 1977, a group of hunters traversing a road in Fallowfield Township came across an eerie sight, a merrily burning industrial barrel. The men carefully approached the barrel and peered inside, immediately recognizing that a human body had been placed within and set aflame. The burned remains were quickly identified as those of Eric Doratio. Whoever had killed the teenager had soaked his body in paint thinner, 2 cans of which were discovered beneath his corpse. The assailant had also made a trail of paint thinner that stretched more than 30 feet from the barrel, which he had presumably used as a fuse. Police were hopeful that the murderer would soon be unmasked, particularly because the barrel was of a rare and distinctive style, made of hard cardboard and supported by steel rings. A nearby company seemed to be the only place in the area where use of this barrel was common, so authorities focused a large portion of their attention there. While they were exploring this lead, however, another arrived in the form of a series of anonymous letters which made reference to Eric Doratio's murder. Investigators suspected that these letters had been written either by the killer or someone who was very familiar with the area where the body had been found. Unfortunately, police were never able to trace the individual who had written the letters, and after a few weeks, they stopped coming. When their 2 most promising lines of inquiry eventually petered out, detectives were left with not much else to go on. They hypothesized that Eric's slaying might have been drug-related, but have no solid evidence to support this conjecture. The death of the Pennsylvania teenager remains a bizarre and grisly enigma. It was the day after Thanksgiving of 1987, and 7-year-old Alexander Harris of Mountain View, California, had been spending the holiday in Las Vegas, Nevada, with his mother Roxanne and his grandparents. On Friday, November 27th, the family was driving back home, but decided to stop at the popular Whiskey Pete's Casino in Primm, near the Nevada-California border. Roxanne set her son up in the casino's video game arcade, and then she and her parents went to gamble nearby. After about 20 minutes, Roxanne went to the arcade to check on Alexander, but to her horror, she found that he had completely disappeared. A search for him yielded nothing, but after reporting his disappearance to casino employees, it was discovered via grainy surveillance footage that a boy appearing to be Alexander was seen walking down a hallway at the resort, hand in hand with a man in his 30s. Because the tape was of such low quality, it was difficult to determine exactly what the suspect looked like, and although there were witness descriptions of him, they differed slightly. According to one witness, the man stood about 5'8" and weighed approximately 170 pounds. He had straight blonde hair that was about collar length, wore silver wire-rimmed glasses, and was clad in a brown members-only style jacket and dark-colored pants. The second witness's account was similar, but described the suspect as taller, more like 6 feet, and specified that the frames of the glasses were round. Apparently, the man resembled Alexander to such a degree that witnesses had assumed they were father and son. 2 sketches were produced and released to the public. There was no sign of the child for more than a month, but eventually the boy's remains were uncovered beneath an off-property trailer, one of 10 trailers near Whiskey Pete's that housed off-duty casino executives. Alexander's body showed no signs of trauma, and he was dressed in the same clothes he'd been wearing on the day he vanished. His glasses were found nearby. Authorities believed he had likely been strangled. Soon after the body was found, police arrested a computer programmer named Howard Lee Haupt, who somewhat resembled the man in the sketches. Haupt had been spending the Thanksgiving weekend at Whiskey Pete's while he was attending a land sailing tournament being held in the desert nearby. Haupt had no prior criminal record and easily passed 2 polygraph tests. In addition, none of the witnesses could pick Haupt out of a lineup, and several people came forward to confirm that Haupt had indeed been at the tournament at the time Alexander Harris went missing. Despite this, he was nevertheless arrested and charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. Haupt was placed on trial in 1989, and after 5 weeks of testimony, a jury acquitted Haupt after only a few hours of deliberation. Haupt later sued for damages, though the case was eventually settled out of court. No further arrests were ever made, and the identity of the man who lured Alexander Harris to his death remains unknown. Thank you, as always, for watching. Remember, if you liked the video, please remember to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, please go visit crimeimmemorial.com, where I do a lot more written content about unsolved murders and the occasional updates on cold cases. I'll see you guys again on the next one.